Won't you have another bite? My husband's grandmother was a good Southern cook, and this was her refrain. She was in her element when she was cooking for friends and family, and her greatest concern was that someone might leave the table without having eaten their fill. A simple lunch was as important as a holiday dinner. Early in my experiences of eating at her house, I once ate 3 or 4 hot dogs because I could not figure out how to politely decline the offers of more. Her food was not exotic, but it was always good, and her joy in sharing it with others was clearly obvious. Many of us have memories of traditions and rituals with family, and friends, or community that are centered around food. Here at CHS, we just finished our Lenten soup suppers with food and fellowship, followed by a Lenten study and Compline. And of course, on Sunday, we always have coffee hour after the services. These sorts of traditions are nothing new. Our Bible readings tonight touch on rituals from 2,000 years ago that still have meaning now. These rituals also relate to shared meals, but they're not just about the food. In Exodus, we're given the basis for the Jewish holiday of Passover. The reading tells us how the food is to be prepared and eaten. But again, it's not just about the food. These directions for preparing the food and the meal are about being ready to leave Egypt, and more importantly, about marking the houses of the Jews so that they will be spared from the destruction of the 10th plague. God has saved his people and is setting them free from their slavery in Egypt. In his letter to the Corinthians, Paul seems to be simply reminding us about how to celebrate the Lord's Supper. What we don't hear is the context to this reminder. In the verses before and after this, he's been addressing behavior in Corinth. I learned that the church in Corinth, at that time, the Roman social customs, they wouldn't have mixed different levels of social classes. When they had the Lord's Supper, when they celebrated it, they probably were meeting at someone's house, a wealthier member of the church, and they would have had a whole meal, not just a small portion. But they were separating the people by class, and so not everybody was participating equally. They weren't all having the same experience. Paul is reminding them that at the Lord's Supper, and as members of the body of Christ, we are all equal. In our gospel reading today, we have the institution of the Eucharist that we still celebrate. Jesus has his last supper with the disciples. I wonder if they realized that it was the last supper, their last opportunity to celebrate Passover with Jesus. Leonardo da Vinci painted a mural of this Last Supper, and it's on a convent wall in Milan, Italy. You've probably seen a reproduction of it. According to Shelley Isak, an art historian, it's the most reproduced religious piece of artwork. The mural strives to capture the moment right after Jesus has told the disciples that one of them will betray him. You can imagine the atmosphere. 1 minute, it's a religious celebration, and the next is terribly awkward. Perhaps you've been at that family gathering where someone has said something wrong or dropped a big bombshell. I think this would have been quite that moment. In the mural, some of the disciples are upset, some are surprised, questioning, and Judas appears to be in a shadow. Da Vinci tried to show what he thought the emotion of that moment was. Mark's version of this Last Supper, he starts with this announcement before they've even gotten to the breaking of bread. The words we use today. This expectation of betrayal is only one disturbing thing they're going to hear tonight. Jesus, after he breaks the bread and shares the wine with them, Jesus goes on to tell them that they are all going to desert him. None of us would like to hear that we're going to do something that we would see as a failure or something that we think we might be stronger than. But Jesus knows and loves the disciples. Furthermore, he understands them. their humanity and their weaknesses, just as he understands us. He has shared in that humanity. For me, this is very clearly illustrated as we move on in the reading to the garden. The disciples can't stay awake, even when Jesus asks them to. It's been a busy time since they came to Jerusalem. A lot of excitement, they've had a big meal, there's been some emotional ups and downs to the evening. It's not surprising that they fall asleep. I think I would probably nod off myself. The truly striking thing to me, though, isn't that the disciples fall asleep. What stands out is the description of Jesus' distress, his frustration with the disciples falling asleep, and his prayer that perhaps this might pass from him. He's expressing a real human fear of what is to come, and a human need for companionship when facing something that seems overwhelming. Yet he also expresses his total acceptance of his Father's will. This too can be challenging for us from a human perspective. Perhaps that acceptance of God's will, especially when it differs from ours, is easier when we share it with those who share and support us in our faith. Jesus wants the disciples to be there for him. Of course, the disciples are not there for him as he faces the events of these 3 days. Even so, he has already told them that he will be there for them and for us. He's told them that he gives himself up for them, for all of us. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. He will stay awake with us. When we realize we need him, and even when we don't, he's there. When we partake of the Eucharist, he's there. When we fail, or when we're weak, or when we need forgiveness, he is there. We are all invited to have faith and to come to his table. Won't you have another bite? The words and the circumstances are quite different, but the sentiment is similar. Like Vic's grandmother, Jesus doesn't want us to walk away empty, but full. He wants us to be full with the realization of his love and a relationship with him.